Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to remove this super annoying check engine light on your Mitsubishi Montero. Now, this is going to apply to anything that was made between 2001 and 2006 in the United States. And it's this service engine light right here. It's service engine soon. That is functionally your check engine light. We don't have a normal little icon that comes up like other cars. That's what the check engine light looks like on this car. Now, I know the codes I've had. I've had them for years, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles even, and I don't want to look at it anymore, and fixing it is just not cost effective. I live in Montana. We do not have emissions here, and I know that's a catalytic converter code. I've tried to swap the cats around. I'm not going to drop $1,000 just to make that light go off. So I'm going to show you how to take this dash apart, how to get in there, how to remove that light. And while we're in there, I'm going to show you how to fix other things. Like if you have a gas gauge that doesn't read correctly, or if you have a temperature gauge that doesn't read correctly, or even if you have a speedometer that kind of acts up. I'm going to show you how to fix all those problems as we get into the dash and take out that bulb. So let's get into it. Now the first step is going to be removing this dash, and that's really easy to do. There's two screws up here that you're going to pull, and then you're going to take this black valance out. With these two screws removed, now you just drop the steering wheel down, and you can just kind of finagle this thing out. You just pull it out, and you got to kind of get the lip out from underneath there, and then just work it out right like that. And then you're exposed to the rest of the dash. There's two screws up here that need to come out. Those are just Phillips heads, as well as two down here. That's what holds the whole dashboard in. It's helpful to have a magnet on a stick for this. That helps you kind of fish them out once you unscrew them. But take those four out, and then you'll be able to pull out the dash. The other thing is, it's probably best to make sure the car is off and there are no lights on this dash when you pull it out. So let's take those screws out. With those four screws removed, it's now time to pull the dash. It just involves getting in here and getting behind it a little bit and giving it a good pull. There's no extra wires on the back, as you'll see in a second, to get this thing off. It's gonna make some noises that are probably pretty unpleasant, but it's gonna come out just like that. And the easiest way to do it is to take it off like that. So with that, there's the plugs. You've got those three plugs that are in the back, and then you've got these three kind of like strip connectors right here. Now, one thing to be really cognizant of is these need to go back. One time I put a dashboard back and this piece was folded underneath that, and obviously it's not going to make contact. So good to inspect these, make sure they're looking good, but that's what that sound is just this kind of ribbon. And if you're not ripping it, then it's going to be fine. So now that we're on the back side of the dash, you can see all sorts of lights. So if you have one of these four-wheel drive lights burned out, this is a great time to replace that, or a door or some other light. There's a lot of them that are really easily accessible. The best way to do that is to pull this light out, just turn it counterclockwise, pull it out, and then if you have a flashlight, you can shine it in there and you can see on the other side what it's lighting up, and that'll show you which port this corresponds to on the other side. That'll help you change out the light bulbs. So now that we got this out, we're going to take it further apart. So let's go inside, get it on the bench, and strip it down. Now that we're inside, I'm going to show you how to get in here and actually get to these lights. So you'll notice on the back side here, there's a bunch of lights down here, but up here, you've got all these connectors. And so you can't actually access the light bulbs that are in here. So you actually have to do that from the front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off this plastic cover, this clear one right here, and this black cover, and get to the actual board that's underneath that, so you can see the gauges as well as this whole display panel. So I'm going to take that apart. Now, getting these clips off is fairly intuitive. Just look at where it connects together. There's going to be separate ones for the clear plastic as well as separate ones for the black plastic, and you got to do the clear plastic first. Sweet, there's the clear plastic removed. You can see we're down to the black plastic. You can start to see a little bit of the lights in here. So now let's remove the black plastic. Two clips up top, two on the bottom right here, and then don't forget this one. That one really wants to hold on. Be really careful when prying these up to not break the old plastic. black cover removed, and you can see the actual gauges here. Now be really careful. You can see right here, this is your trip reset, and it sticks out pretty far, so don't go dropping this anywhere. Not that you'd want to anyways, but there you can see the gauges. So what we need to do is get at this section right here. This is where you display a lot of your like you said, check engine light, your cruise control lights over your high beam light, your turn signals, warning lights, and that's all held in by this guy right here. So we need to get this whole thing out. The easiest way to do it is there's actually two clips, one on this side and one on this side. And what you got to do is depress those in on both sides, and then the whole thing will pop out. So now you can see the back of the controls, and just for reference, this is your high beam indicator, this is your left turn signal, and the other one over here, that's your right turn signal. And so those are just regular bulbs, but you can see the other ones, it's all a circuit board on this side. So we actually have to pop this thing apart and get to the other side. Now, you can do this with this strip attached, but you have to get to the back side here. Just one more thing that you need to take off, and that's that circuit board. So it's held in by these white tabs. So I usually work one way to the other and just start to pry this up a little bit. Be very careful with the circuit board. But once we pop that out, it'll expose to us the lights that are on the other side. All right, so here's our light bulbs. You can see these really tiny bulbs right here. These are all your warning indicators. So this applies for your check engine light, as well as if you have any of these other ones out that you want to replace. Okay, so this is going to require a little bit more digging. Like I said before, on the back side, if you shine a flashlight through, you can see where it goes. This one, you're going to have to do a similar thing to figure out which one of these is the check engine light. So I can see right there, there's my check engine light. And what I need to do is line that up, and I can usually use the bulb next to it, so you can see that one's the high beams. Then we got the service engine soon. So I know that this one is the high beams, so this one is your check engine light. You can kind of just put this on top and you can find it. So now I'm just gonna get a pair of pliers in there, and I'm just gonna pull that bulb out. You kind of have to be a little bit delicate with it. It doesn't really want to come out, but it's held on by those two prongs right there. So I'm just gonna get some pliers in, and I'm gonna yank that thing out so that I don't even have a check engine light in there anymore. Well, I just shattered it. That's okay. I'm not reusing that bulb. All right, the bulb's been removed. I did shatter it. And this is just a good thing to keep in mind is these tabs, it's gonna be very hard to pick up on camera, but they're pretty fragile. And so you can bend them up, and then putting another bulb on them is pretty hard. I have no idea what the part number for this bulb is, but either way, you just wanna be really delicate. I ended up getting a screwdriver underneath it and prying up. So now my check engine light is gone. That means even if I have a check engine code, it's not gonna light up, and that's what I'm after. I'm okay using a code reader to find that code, but I didn't want that light bulb on. So now that I've got that, the process is pretty simple, but I am gonna have to clean this out. I've got some glass in here. Anything you keep in here is gonna stay in here. So I'm gonna clean this out with an air compressor real quick, and then I'm gonna put this cover back on. Once you have that clicked on, you just push down here, get it mostly lined up, and it's gonna snap right into place. After that's reattached, go ahead and carefully reassemble the black plastic cover. Now, when you're putting this on, you wanna make sure you put this on first, but you also wanna be careful. These two gauges specifically, the coolant gauge and the gas gauge, their needles hang pretty low. They shouldn't hang too low, but as you put them in, you wanna make sure that that needle isn't trapped underneath this black plastic piece. So you go ahead and click it in. Make sure it's in all of these snaps. Make sure that this one goes underneath the white, not on top of it. Otherwise, it'll sit kind of funny in there. Get all of those snapped in, and then go ahead and make sure that your needles move freely, and these do. So while I'm in here, I want to show you guys how to do other things, specifically fix these two gauges. These work on a resistor, and sometimes that resistor becomes unsoldered, and so your gas gauge will be really funky, or what's more common is your coolant will read super high even though it's at a normal temperature. So in order to do that, we've got to get into this guy. So let's pop this off and I'll show you which connectors go bad and how to fix them. So I've got a different dash here to show this because this is the one that I've got pulled apart. So you can see here, there's going to be 3 bolts across the top and 2 on the bottom. You just remove those and then you're just going to kind of wiggle this back and forth. The reason you're wiggling it is because these connectors go into these guys right here on the back of the dash. So you're just going to wiggle that out, and this is your circuit board. Now there's a few things to note about this. This controls quite a few different things in here. It also contains your mileage. So I wrote on here 185,000. That's how many miles are on this part of the computer. So if you ever have to swap your dash but you want to keep your mileage the same, you need to transfer over this board. So let's take a look at this really quick. There are 2 connectors that go bad. The first one is this R12 right here. This R12 controls your gas gauge. So if your gas gauge is all over the place, you've got to resolder that one. The way you do that, you just take a soldering iron, you place it right on there and heat it up until you start to reinvigorate the solder. I don't know what the real word is, but you kind of get it moving again, get it flowing again. You can even add a dab of solder to that. You don't want to add too much, but just enough to kind of reconnect that. And then you do the same on the other side. It doesn't take a lot. It just barely come unsoldered. So just a little bit of solder there will fix that problem. And then this R10 down here, that's your coolant. So if your coolant is either reading super low or it's spiking really high or it's just inconsistent, it's probably this R10 connection right there. So all you got to do is the same thing, hit it with a soldering iron on each side, and then it should be good to go. So after you do those 2, those are the most common 2, it's time to reinstall this back on the dash. And there's a few tricks to that. So here on the back side of the dash, you can see there's your 2 connectors that you want to put this into. It's very easy. You just line those up. The best way to do it is to actually use the holes and these guides at the top to line it up. And then you want to press it in. Press it in firmly on both sides. However, when you do this, it's not going to have a very secure connection. So the first thing to do is tighten all these screws in, just hand tight, and then you actually want to flip the dash over. And then I'll show you how to make sure this is seated properly. So on this side, what you've functionally done is you've put this thing, you've pushed it up against the backside of these gauges. And so it's going to connect to this gauge and all that, but you've got to push in on this area and you'll feel a very definitive pop as it slides into place. Right there, I can feel it moving in. I can feel it settling. So you want to push all around here, not too violently, but you're just trying to get that connector to take up the gap so that it's actually plugged in. So push around here. If you don't, this miles per hour will not read. It'll kind of get stuck or it'll kind of glitch around or your gauge might not work. So make sure to do this. You can always tell when someone's taken their gauge apart and hasn't done this because something's funky here. So make sure to push this in. And then once you're done with that, you can install the clear cover and you can cover all of that up. Okay, when you're sliding the cover on, be super careful of that trip reset. Make sure they're all lined up. Click it in. And there's your dash reassembled and ready for installation. Now back inside the car, I've got the dash, it's ready to install. Again, you want to be super careful that all of these ribbon connectors are in their right spot. This is how they should look. It should kind of curl into there. And that's what you want. You don't want any tears in there or anything like that. This is connected. All the lights have been reinstalled. And so now it's time to put this in. Now, installation, same as uninstallation, but in reverse. Just kind of finagle it in there, get it set up. There's no real gentle way to do this. And then you want to make sure that these bolt holes for the screws are as lined up as possible. So that's what I usually use to kind of tell me how I'm doing in the back. Try to line those up and then you just push it in. Or again, you're seating those connections. And so it's going to be a little bit weird to push it in, but once you push it in and it stops moving, that's when you're good to go. Now you can reattach those screws. However, I recommend in this situation, before you do that, go ahead and fire up the car. And you can see already right here, that check engine light, it's not there. The other thing I can see is that the gas gauge is working. That's really good. And you'll notice this. Whenever you remove the dash, you're gonna lose your trip data. So if you have precious trip data that you need to save, make sure you write that down before you pull it because you are gonna lose it. So now let's fire this thing up and make sure everything's working properly before we button it up. All right, RPM gauge, looking good. no check engine light. Now, obviously, this still has a code. And if I was to plug in my OBD2 reader into the port down there, it would tell me, actually the port's down there. But either way, it would tell me that there's a code. And I'm fine with that. If the car starts running weird, I'll throw my scanner on there and figure it out. But I just don't want to look at that light. It's annoying. I know what it is. It's not helpful for me. So for me, I like that it's gone. Maybe you have a different light that you want to take out and you can use this process to do the same thing. But now that that's good, the dash is in, everything is set, all my gauges are reading correctly. I'm super excited about that. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. If you need to remove a light that's bugging you, maybe it's the check engine light, maybe you need to fix your gauges, your gas, or your temperature, or you have a different bulb that's burnt out. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys. But thanks for coming along with me on this one, and I'll see you on the next one.